In this episode, I discuss AI applied to network security with Geoff Coulehan, Head of Sales and Strategic Alliances at MixMode. MixMode is a leading AI cybersecurity company based in Santa Barbara, California. Geoff does a great job explaining recent network security challenges and MixMode's novel approach. There are significant changes in cybersecurity attacks and the required response, driven by the new ways of working during the COVID lockdown. Remote working, bring your own device, and extensive use of conference systems are some of the developments leading to new vulnerabilities. As the network behavior changes significantly, traditional cybersecurity solutions generate a large number of false positives. A false positive is an unusual behavior compared to the past that requires human attention but ultimately turns out not to be a real attack. The traditional cybersecurity solutions are rules-based, using past data on attacks, for example, to define certain actions with the help of experts. Newer tools use supervised AI that requires labeling of data. This means human experts are linking data, for example network behavior, to known attacks such that the machine is able to alert on future known attacks based on seeing the same data. As we saw in the episode 18 on financial crime with Simon Moss from Symphony ASD AI, these approaches fail to uncover new types of attacks, unknown unknowns, how Simon called them, or zero-day attacks, how Geoff refers to them in this episode. In addition, these approaches are extremely expensive to implement in the long run due to the human effort required. The approach that does work is unsupervised AI that identifies attack patterns in real time without data labeling and with minimum human supervision. Before we listen to Geoff, a few terms from the interview defined. SIM, Security Information Management, is a software aimed at discovering bad behavior by collecting, storing, and analyzing data logs. NTA, Network Traffic Analysis, a term coined by Gartner, refers to a software product space that analyzes network traffic to detect and respond to security threats. Low and slow attacks involve what appear to be legitimate traffic driving a slowdown of user applications, like slow traffic that intentionally clogs a highway. Now let's continue with the interview with Geoff. We'll be back with my key takeaways. I'm talking to Geoff Coulehan, Head of Sales and Strategic Alliances at MixMode. MixMode is a leading provider of unsupervised AI for network security, monitoring, analytics, and forensics. Geoff, thank you for joining. Please introduce yourself and MixMode.
Thank you so much, Chip. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As you mentioned, my name is Geoff Coulehan. I run sales and alliances for MixMode. I have 20 years or so of experience in the cybersecurity and advanced analytics space. And I've been with MixMode for the last year, really focused on bringing artificial intelligence-informed network traffic analysis to customers who have been struggling with traditional problems with identifying real-time threats and responding to those threats with additive artificial intelligence.
So to start on a very current topic, what has changed in the past few months of lockdown and people working from home in terms of security threats? And do you have a sense on how well did companies respond?
Yeah, it's an important question and a conversation that we've been having with a lot of our customers. I actually asked this question in all of the conversations we've been having, just to understand really what the business problems they're having look like. And the fundamental issue they'll tell you is that they now are dealing with a much larger attack surface than before. And when you press them a little bit further and ask, what does that mean very specifically? They'll talk specifically about dramatic changes in what they would describe as typical network behavior. And for security operations center teams and IT teams, the impact is really significant because the established rules and thresholds that they have previously used to determine outliers and threat anomalies are just simply no longer accurate. And that issue is compounded by a couple of things, in particular, the widespread use of conference systems like Zoom and WebEx. It's been a very real issue for a lot of these security teams. And we're seeing people have a very specific preference about one versus the other, and mentioning very candidly some of the security concerns they have about one versus the other, and struggles that they're really tasked with addressing as employees are bringing their own devices and participating in these multiple conferencing tools. And at the end of the day, the security operations center teams, they're just inundated with more false positives for threats and anomalies than they had before. And with these new kind of work at home environments, what they're really struggling with is trying to sort through what represents real threats and anomalies. How do we respond to those? And perhaps most importantly, how do I do it with fewer resources than we had before?
So what does MixMode do in the context of existing security stack and solutions that companies have in place? What specific problem does it solve?
At MixMode, we believe that unsupervised artificial intelligence should be the first line of defense and the starting point really for zero-day attacks and threat and anomaly prevention. What we mean by that very specifically is traditional approaches to security investigation and event management. They don't provide any real visibility into zero-day attack detection. They're typically reliant exclusively on human intelligence to determine if an anomaly or an event is a real threat or not. And they're typically based exclusively on historic information. And what I mean by that is these tools, these traditional security investigation and event management platforms, they were designed as machine learning platforms for search and investigations. What that means in practice is customers were typically required to aggregate information from a number of different sources, normalize that information or put it in a format that can be analyzed effectively and quickly by search and investigation tools. And then it delivers a series of reports or scheduled reports to analysts. And the biggest problem with that approach is simply by the inherent nature of how these systems are architected. All of the information is out of date by the time it reaches the analyst. It's exclusively looking at historic information to try and identify what happened after the fact. And at MixMode, we take a very different approach. We put artificial intelligence in front of that entire process and use the artificial intelligence platform to elevate and prioritize anomalies and threats in real time so customers can respond to them promptly. And we even take it to another level. We provide a layer of predictive intelligence. So looking at information real time on the network and identifying anomalies that look like pre-attack behaviors or behaviors that are indicative of a forthcoming attack with the intention of focusing the operator on those specific activities so they can stop it in real time and really address the problem that's been plaguing the industry for decades, which is most of these attacks are identified 12 plus months after the fact, and the platforms are designed to go back and look at what happened. We're taking a different approach, and we're trying to stop them at or near real time and do so without additive resources.
You mentioned net traffic monitoring as unique in the MixMode approach. What it is, how does it work, and why is it important for threat detection?
Yeah, that's a great question. Network traffic analysis was originally created as a supplemental category to security investigation and event management. I described earlier where information is aggregated and normalized, and people will be running searches against machine level data. What's interesting about that traditional approach is all of the products that deliver that solution, they're licensed based on the volume of data that is ingested to be searched and analyzed. And network traffic information generates a huge amount of data. Ironically, the security information event management vendors acknowledge that network traffic data provides the greatest visibility for real-time threat and anomaly prevention. But it's so cost prohibitive for customers to extract, transform, and load that information into a SIEM. It's typically the first data source that is excluded from that type of deployment. So in comes the category of network traffic analysis, which was originally defined as a supplemental category for operators to be able to look at a separate silo of network traffic information and then typically manually correlate that with legacy information they were seeing from a SIEM. At MixMode, we've taken a very different approach in that we have combined the functionality of traditional network traffic analytics with the full search and investigative capabilities of a legacy security information event management system. And we've applied artificial intelligence in front of those approaches. And what that does is it allows us to make AI-informed insights to identify true positives and elevate those events and anomalies that are indicative of true threats to the operator, while supporting the requirement to provide traditional forensic search and investigation of that legacy or log data without the requirement to extract and normalize and replicate data in a manner that adds cost and adds latency to the program. So we are having a lot of conversations with customers who are driving us to address the historical shortcomings of a SIEM solution and the historical shortcomings of a traditional or legacy NTA system, with our AI-informed approach to real-time network traffic analytics and monitoring.
To stay on this topic for just one question, what type of anomalies can NTA uncover?
One of the things that makes MixMode very unique is we're not just looking for specific anomalies. If you're looking exclusively for anomalies against an outdated or inaccurate baseline or the data that you're comparing against for those anomalies, it compounds the problem of false positives. MixMode is categorized as a third wave artificial intelligence platform. And the waves of artificial intelligence were categories that were defined by DARPA. And third wave artificial intelligence refers to four primary categories. One being self-supervised, the next being context-aware. We talked a little bit about this idea of being predictive in nature, and last but certainly not least, generative. And if I take them one at a time, what makes MixMode really unique is, first and foremost, we're a fully self-supervised system. And what that means is that in production, MixMode's artificial intelligence does not require any human operator to deploy, run, or tune the system. The next part of the component that I wanted to speak to is this idea of being context-aware. And what we mean by context-aware is that MixMode is independently able to identify in-context patterns or trends that are independent of historic or contextual models. And very specifically to your point, that is a very unique differentiator when it comes to anomaly detection. The baseline for our platform continually adapts and can pull in information that would exist outside of a historical baseline. It can correlate all of that information in a way that only surfaces anomalies that represent true threats based on multiple other factors. The second to last topic that differentiates third wave AI is this idea of it being predictive in nature. And as I mentioned earlier, our AI is intelligent enough to focus the attention of the operator on pre-attack activities or anomalies that are indicative of a forthcoming attack. And last but certainly not least is this idea of a generative baseline. MixMode is able to operate on day one without any pre-existing or established data. And if I was to compare that to the traditional approach, again, a former requirement to have a year or two worth of data to aggregate and normalize as a precursor to be able to operate the system is no longer an issue with MixMode. Anomaly detection in of itself is insufficient in that if it's done incorrectly, it will simply contribute and compound the problem of false positives.
Geoff, how does MixMode approach the human-machine collaboration in threat detection, and how does it provide explainability of findings such as threats detected?
I love this question. I came out of the data warehousing industry, years ago, and I see a lot of parallels here. Back when I was in the data warehousing industry, there was a time when, if you wanted a particular report or to understand trends in behavior, you had to make a request of the data analytics team, and they would make changes to the underlying repository, and a day or a week later, they'd give you a report back that was consumable. And if you compare that to where we are today, all systems provide advanced analytics that can be consumable and understood by business professionals. And in the cybersecurity industry, it should be no different. We have moved beyond this idea that the very technically savvy business professionals that are operating in multiple lines of business should be able to understand true network threats and how those threats are impacting the core business itself, whether or not they're a SOC analyst or someone that's responsible for, a marketing organization. We think it's very important to surface real threats and anomalies in a manner that is consumable and actionable by both non-technical users as well as technical users. And the way we handle that is by providing robust visualizations to show the events that are bubbled up by the AI, providing descriptions of why they were bubbled up by the AI in plain English, and also providing the supporting detail for the more technically savvy analysts to dig into the full packet details and look at the underlying components to determine what appropriate remediation steps should be taken. Fundamentally, there needs to be a shift in the cybersecurity industry and open acknowledgement that business professionals need to be able to understand and act upon this information. If that information is identified and bubbled up and prioritized by a third wave artificial intelligence solution, the real benefit there is you have more eyes on the problem with different perspectives or experience levels. You can actually combine forces by having the business teams determine how to act upon those threats and activities, working in conjunction with the security analyst teams.
What companies use MixMode today, and could you share some success stories?
MixMode has been used in production by federal entities, state, local municipalities, as I mentioned, and large commercial organizations as well. We have a strong footprint in the financial services industry. As you can imagine, financial services industries have been on the forefront of cybersecurity threat investigative analysis for things like fraud, waste, and abuse, as well as adversarial AI for quite some time. And also, state, local, and federal municipalities. We do have examples of deployments wherein our system has been proven successful in being able to identify greater than 95% suppression of false positives within a 1-week time period. We really talk about this learning period or this baseline establishment for our platform as being a unique differentiator. In this particular customer example, they were able to turn the system on and run it without any human operator training or intervention. And they were able to see accurate suppression of false positives greater than 85% on the first day, which I think is really compelling, and greater than 95% by that 7-day period. What's also interesting is there was a number of attacks that were taking place during this time period. And because we were able to work closely with the customer, we were able to understand that after those attacks were launched, we were able to go back and kind of work together to understand what actually transpired. And it was great in that it was successful in identifying, and I mentioned earlier, the artificial intelligence was intelligent enough to identify the leading attack behaviors indicative of the forthcoming attack. We were able to identify the command and control machines. We were able to identify the compromised machines, all without any human intervention or operator intervention. That is actually reflective of one of our typical deployments. Most of our customers are installed and configured within an hour. They're live and operational and getting AI-informed insights by day one. And the system is fully self-deployed and self-tuned by the end of that 7-day learning period.
Geoff, as we are reaching the end, the final question, what are some of the newer emerging cybersecurity threats? And are we prepared to respond or to defend against threats we have not seen before?
It's really important, I think, for everyone to acknowledge, and our customers know this, the number of cyber threats are increasing daily. The number of zero-day attacks are increasing all the time. And most of the traditional approaches to solving these problems are compounding the system and making it worse. And what do I mean by that? We're seeing the attack frequencies increase. We're seeing adversarial AI attacks, state-sponsored adversarial AI attacks increasing. Internal threats increasing, especially with the COVID and working from home types of challenges. And as those threats are increasing, customers have been historically spending more and more on legacy approaches to solving these problems, and they're adding resources. But the ability to respond to those threats continues to increase. The cost invested in trying to solve these problems continues to increase. And the number of resources that they're required to add to address these problems continues to increase. So we feel we have a very unique approach to solving a lot of these business problems, in that we're taking a very innovative AI-first approach to solving these problems. We're focused on reducing the cost of additive solutions. We're focused on reducing the cost of creating, establishing, and replicating data before these systems can even operate. And with our AI as the first line of defense, we are able to be more effective in identifying true positives, true threats without human intervention and without the additive costs of resources or infrastructure, much more effectively than the legacy approaches to these business problems. We want to put our money where our mouth is. We are not a black box. When we work with our customers, we are very transparent about the way our AI works, how it is deployed, how it should be used in production. And what we found is that customers are very receptive to that approach. I think there's a lot of commoditization of the terms like AI and self-supervised and semi-supervised and these types of things. So when we are engaging with our customers, we want to be very open and very collaborative and very transparent about how our AI works, what makes it different. And we'd like to engage customers in proof of concepts. We kind of openly acknowledge that with enough time and enough resources, there's a lot of vendors on the market that can make their products look like ours. But we can show the ability to stand our solution up, operate effectively without any human intervention by day one, fully self-tuned and ready for enterprise production by day 7.
Geoff, this was great. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the call.
Let's wrap it up with my 3 takeaways on AI for cybersecurity. Number 1, the new reality of working remotely and increased digital interactions change the historical data patterns, create new vulnerabilities, and invite new types of security threats. Number two, whether it's financial crime or IT security, traditional tools are unable to cope both with the new normal data patterns given new behaviors and the larger attack space. That results in a flooding with false positives that challenge security professionals. Number three, unsupervised AI is better suited to allow for cost-effective implementation that does not rely on significant expert support to rewrite rules, label data, or continuously retrain the models. It also allows identifying the increased number of new-to-the-world attacks that cannot be uncovered based on looking at past data patterns.